If I asked you why many businesses make sales and still struggle with money, the answer is usually not hard work. It is not even talent. Very often, it is because the owner does not fully understand where the money is going. That is why today, I want to walk you through fixed costs and variable costs in the simplest way possible. At entrepreneurs.ng, we make business easy for entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, and the brands that serve them. Do you want to start right? We help you register your business with CAC quickly. Reach out at contact@redalia.com. Do you want guidance as you build your business? Join the Entrepreneur's Success Blueprint program, our 30-day hands-on business school. Enroll now. Do not build in silence. Tell your business story on entrepreneurs.ng today and be seen by the world. And if you want your brand to be discovered through trusted, search-driven content and strategic visibility, we can help through our different visibility packages. Learn the ways we can work with you at www.entrepreneurs.ng or reach us at business@entrepreneurs.ng. In this video, I am going to help you understand fixed costs and variable costs so well that you can apply the lesson directly to your business. What fixed costs and variable costs mean? Let us start from the beginning. A cost is simply money the business must spend to keep going. If money leaves the business so work can continue, that is a cost. Rent is a cost. Salaries are a cost. Materials are a cost. Packaging is a cost. Delivery is a cost. Now, most of these costs fall into two big groups. Some costs stay mostly the same, even when business activity changes. Other costs rise and fall as the business becomes more busy or less busy. That is where fixed costs and variable costs come in. Fixed costs are the regular expenses a business must pay whether sales are high or low. Even if the business has a quiet month, these costs are still waiting. They do not disappear because sales are slow. They stay there, asking to be paid. Variable costs work differently. These are the costs that move with activity. When I produce more, they usually go up. When I sell less or produce less, they usually come down. So while fixed costs follow time, variable costs follow the amount of work the business is doing. That is the easiest way to remember it. Fixed costs stay. Variable costs move. Fixed costs are there because the business exists. Variable costs are there because the business is producing, selling, serving, or delivering. Let us now look at fixed costs properly. Fixed costs are recurring expenses that remain fairly constant over time. They give structure to the business, but they also create responsibility. The business must carry them whether it is making a lot of money or going through a slow season. Common examples include office rent, shop rent, salaries for permanent staff, insurance premiums, software subscriptions, loan repayments, and equipment leases. These costs are usually predictable, which is useful for planning. But they can also feel heavy because they must still be paid even when money coming in is lower than expected. Fixed costs come in different forms, but they all share the same basic nature. They do not change just because output changes. Rent is still rent. A salary for a permanent team member is still a salary. An annual insurance payment is still due. A license fee or permit cost still has to be paid. There is also depreciation, which many people forget to think about. If I buy machinery, office equipment, or a vehicle, those assets lose value over time. That loss in value matters because it reflects part of the real cost of running the business. It may not feel like cash leaving my pocket at that exact moment, but it is still part of the financial picture. Some utilities also have a fixed part. For example, there may be a base fee for internet or electricity that I must pay whether usage is high or low. That base charge behaves like a fixed cost. So even inside one bill, I can sometimes find both a fixed element and a variable element. Now let us move to variable costs. Variable costs are expenses that rise or fall based on production, sales, or service delivery. The more the business does, the more these costs usually increase. The less the business does, the lower these costs tend to be. Think about a bakery. If the bakery makes 100 loaves of bread, it needs a certain amount of flour, sugar, butter, and packaging. If it makes 1,000 loaves, it needs much more. So those ingredients and materials are variable costs because they change with output. Other common examples include shipping costs, delivery expenses, payment processing charges, commissions paid to sales agents, and hourly or contract labor linked to specific tasks. These costs are directly connected to activity. They grow when the work grows. Variable costs can be helpful because they offer flexibility. If business slows down, those costs usually fall too. That can reduce pressure in difficult periods. But variable costs also need close attention because if they rise quietly in the background, they can eat into profit without me noticing early enough. Types of variable costs every entrepreneur should recognize. There are different kinds of variable costs, and they show up differently depending on the type of business. Raw materials and supplies are one of the most obvious examples. A fashion brand needs fabric. A furniture maker needs wood. A food business needs ingredients. These are direct inputs tied to production. Packaging costs are another important type. Bottles, cartons, wrappers, labels, and branded boxes all cost money. The more products I prepare to sell, the more packaging I need. That makes packaging a variable cost. Direct labor can also be variable if workers are paid by the hour, by the project, or by the number of units produced. Freelancers, temporary staff, delivery workers, and contract-based team members often fall into this category. Their cost changes as business activity changes. Then there are sales commissions, shipping and delivery costs, transaction charges, and the usage-based part of utility bills. These all increase as more sales happen or as more work is done. So when I am calculating the true cost of serving each customer, or producing each item, I need to include them. How to calculate fixed costs in a business. Let us now move from understanding to calculation. If I want to manage costs well, I need to know how to calculate them properly. I will start with fixed costs. The first step is to list all recurring expenses the business pays regularly. These are usually long-term or contractual commitments. I am talking about rent, salaries for permanent staff, insurance, software subscriptions, equipment leases, and loan repayments. You need a full list, not a partial one. The second step is to separate fixed costs from variable costs. This matters because many entrepreneurs mix them together, and then wonder why their numbers are confusing. If a cost stays mostly the same regardless of output, it belongs in the fixed cost category. If it changes with sales or production, it does not. The third step is to add all monthly fixed costs together. That total tells me the minimum amount the business must cover before I start thinking about variable costs or profit. It is the baseline amount needed just to keep the business standing. The fourth step is to calculate fixed cost per unit if the business produces measurable units. I do this by dividing total fixed costs by the number of units produced in that period. This helps me understand how much of my fixed cost burden is being carried by each unit I sell. The fifth step is to review fixed costs over time. Fixed costs can change. Rent can increase. Salaries can be adjusted. Insurance premiums can rise. So I should not treat them as numbers I calculate once and forget. I need to keep checking them so my planning stays accurate. How to calculate variable costs in a business. Now let's calculate variable costs. The first step is to identify every cost that changes when output or sales change. This means I must pay attention to what happens when the business becomes more active. Which costs grow when production grows? Which costs rise when orders rise? The second step is to measure the cost per unit of each variable input. If one loaf of bread needs a certain amount of flour, sugar, and packaging, I need to know how much each of those costs per loaf. The clearer I am here, the better my pricing decisions will be. The third step is to multiply the per unit cost by the number of units produced or sold. If packaging costs a certain amount per unit, and I sell 2,000 units, I multiply that cost by 2,000. I do the same for each variable expense. That shows me the total variable cost for each category. The fourth step is to add all variable costs together for the period I am reviewing. That could be a month, a quarter, or a year. Once I add them up, I can see how much the business is spending on the costs that move with activity. The fifth step is to calculate average variable cost per unit. I do this by dividing total variable costs by total units produced or sold. This number is very important because it helps me understand the cost attached to each sale, which is a key part of setting the right price. Tools entrepreneurs can use to track fixed and variable costs. Now, understanding costs is one thing. Tracking them properly is another. This is where tools become useful. A simple spreadsheet in Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets can work very well for a startup or a small business that is just beginning to organize its numbers. For businesses that need more automation, tools like QuickBooks, Xero, FreshBooks, Wave Accounting, Zoho Books, and Sage Business Cloud Accounting can help track expenses, categorize costs, generate reports, and support smarter decisions. The best tool depends on the size of the business, the complexity of operations, and how much detail I need. What matters most is not using the fanciest tool. What matters most is using a system consistently. Even a simple system can improve financial clarity if I update it regularly and use it to review what the business is actually spending. How fixed and variable costs shape break-even analysis. This is where fixed costs and variable costs come together in a very powerful way. They help me understand my break-even point. The break-even point is the point where total revenue equals total costs. At that point, the business is not making a profit, but it is also not making a loss. Why is this important? Because every entrepreneur needs to know the minimum level of sales required to cover costs. Without that number, I can be active, busy, and even excited, but still have no real idea whether the business is actually healthy. Fixed costs matter here because they set the baseline amount the business must recover. Variable costs matter because they affect how much money is left from each sale after the cost of producing or delivering that sale has been covered. So both types of cost directly shape the path to profit. Once you move beyond the break-even point, each additional sale starts contributing more directly to profit, as long as costs remain under control. That is why understanding cost structure is not just about bookkeeping. It is about survival, planning, and growth. How fixed and variable costs influence pricing strategy. Pricing is one of the most important decisions in business, and both fixed and variable costs play a major role in getting it right. If I set prices too low, I may not cover my fixed costs. If I set prices too high, I may drive customers away. So pricing has to be thoughtful. Fixed costs affect pricing because they tell me how much revenue the business needs every month just to stay afloat. A business with high rent, expensive equipment, or a large permanent team may need stronger margins or higher sales volume to stay healthy. Variable costs affect pricing because they shape profit per unit. If each product costs more to produce, package, deliver, or process, then less money is left after each sale. The lower my variable cost per unit, the more room I have to compete on price while still protecting profit. This is why different businesses choose different pricing strategies. Some use cost-plus pricing, where they add a markup to the total cost per unit. Some use penetration pricing, where they start low to attract customers. Some use value-based pricing, where they price based on what customers believe the offer is worth. Others use premium pricing or dynamic pricing, depending on the business model and the market. The important thing is this: good pricing is not a guess. It is a decision built on cost understanding, market reality, and business goals. When you understand both fixed and variable costs, you can price with confidence instead of hoping my numbers will somehow work out on their own. Smart ways to manage fixed and variable costs. Now let us talk about management. Understanding costs is useful, but the real advantage comes when I use that understanding to improve the way the business runs. Fixed costs and variable costs both need active management. To manage fixed costs well, I can renegotiate leases, review subscriptions, use remote or shared workspaces, and outsource specialized work instead of carrying a large permanent payroll too early. The goal is to avoid locking the business into heavy commitments before revenue is stable enough to support them. To manage variable costs well, I can strengthen supplier relationships, improve production efficiency, reduce waste, automate repetitive processes, and review changing expenses like shipping, packaging, and payment processing fees. Small improvements in these areas can create a big difference in margins over time. The key is to be proactive. I should not wait until the business is in trouble before I start reviewing costs. Strong businesses review cost structure regularly. They ask what is necessary, what is wasteful, what can be improved, and what is beginning to drift upward quietly. Common cost mistakes entrepreneurs must avoid. Even good businesses can struggle when cost decisions are weak. One common mistake is overestimating revenue while underestimating costs. That leads to unrealistic planning, cash shortages, and pressure that could have been avoided with better numbers. Another mistake is misclassifying costs. If you put variable costs where fixed costs should be, or ignore mixed costs completely, your planning becomes distorted. Break-even analysis becomes less reliable, pricing becomes weaker, and you start making decisions from the wrong foundation. Many entrepreneurs also ignore semi-fixed or mixed costs. These are costs that have both fixed and variable parts. Utility bills are a common example. There may be a base charge that stays the same and a usage charge that changes. If you ignore that structure, you may miss where pressure is really coming from. Another serious mistake is overcommitting to fixed costs too early. Taking on an expensive office, too many permanent staff, or large overheads before revenue is stable can put a young business under unnecessary strain. Starting lean gives me room to learn, adjust, and grow with more control. And finally, Many businesses fail to monitor variable costs closely. Supplier prices rise. Packaging costs increase. Shipping becomes more expensive. Payment processing fees take a bigger share. If you do not review these things regularly, profit can shrink quietly while sales still look healthy on the surface. So let us bring everything together clearly. Fixed costs are the costs that stay mostly the same no matter the level of business activity. Variable costs are the costs that rise or fall as production, sales, or service delivery changes. One gives me structure. The other moves with activity. When you understand both, you can budget better, price better, track profit more accurately, identify your break-even point more confidently, and make smarter growth decisions. This is one of those business lessons that look simple on the surface but changes everything once you start using it properly. And this is exactly why Entrepreneurs.ng exists. At Entrepreneurs.ng, we make business easy for entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, and the brands that serve them. Do you want to start right? We help you register your business with CAC quickly. Reach out at contact@redalia.com. Do you want guidance as you build your business? Join the Entrepreneur's Success Blueprint program, our 30-day hands-on business school. Enroll now. Do not build in silence. Tell your business story on Entrepreneurs.ng today and be seen by the world. And if you want your brand to be discovered through trusted, search-driven content and strategic visibility, we can help through our different visibility packages. Learn the ways we can work with you at www.entrepreneurs.ng or reach us at business@entrepreneurs.ng. We are here to help entrepreneurs move from confusion to clarity, from effort to structure, and from survival thinking to strategic growth through practical insights, business resources, and solutions that support real progress. If this video helped you understand fixed costs and variable costs more clearly, read the full article on entrepreneurs.ng, https://entrepreneurs.ng/fixed versus variable costs/ and continue learning from the complete guide. Keep building. See you in the next video.